until they get in your missing fire, go right back. And don't take 30 seconds to perform. I'm the best ever. There's never been anybody better. I'm Sonny Liston, I'm Jack Dippy. There's no one like I'm from Airport. There's no one that can match me. My style is impeccable. My defense is impregnable. Look at that. Look at that combination. I kept telling you, he had no punch. He couldn't hit. He's playing like a physic. He's missing. Let me see you, boss. I hadn't started dancing yet. Like, when did hurt? Facial first round and Curtis gets hurt. Curtis got stunned. Acko was stunned early in the round. Great first round. Incredible. Perhaps one of the best in middleweight history. That black guy, he hit hard. Bang, 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 bang. Fire. Y'all the Mongo.
What's going on, my boxing public? It's me again, writer and reporter for RealCombatMedia.com, George G.Alé down here, and we're coming off of a pretty decent weekend of boxing. Looks like Keith Thurman headlined this past weekend's fight on PBC from his long-awaited return against Josecito Lopez, who surprisingly had a very good turnout. Looked really good, considering the quality of opponent. I mean, we pretty much know Lopez pretty much has been around the block pretty much, and was expected to lose this pretty handedly, but was obviously with Thurman was expected to have some form of rust, and he definitely showed that in this fight. We'll break that down a little bit more. Along with other things, we'll be talking about the preview for Kovalev versus Alvarez rematch that'll be taking place tomorrow, Saturday night as well. We'll do a little preview of that. It looks like and just go over some recent headlines with Danny Jacobs and Tevin Farmer, who's also going to be headlining in Philadelphia, and there'll be more details on that too later in the podcast. Hopefully some good news on that that I'll be keeping in touch with you guys. But first things first, let's just go over the past, or at least the most recent fight taking place was, again, that Keith Thurman returned from I almost haven't even really kept a really decent count of it, of at least how long that layoff was, but it definitely longer than it should have. I believe it looks like he said, I believe there was like a hand injury issue, I believe, at first, and then overall, I think a lot of at least what they talked about through the buildup of this fight was his, I guess, the depression that he had to deal with. I guess was the not really returning, or I'm not necessarily sure. Again, really, at least what it was stemming from entirely. My only thought, at least my initial thoughts, especially being at least at one point being a fighter, or at least being the competitive spirit that holds there, you definitely hate that inactivity of not being able to go against your peers, and especially seeing them, do well and do bigger and better things. So I can definitely understand it to that standpoint. But like I said, expected to look rusty, not expected to really look good that much. Something to just grow some confidence on. But man, that was rough. Did his tip just standard boxing, really. Used a lot of lateral movement and going just around the ring. For the most part of the first two rounds, Lopez very mechanical and very predictable in seeing his punches coming. So it was almost, you kind of knew exactly what the night was going to look like for a moment. Until he started connecting. Looks like till a little bit, like I would say, late in the second round, and then just poured it on in the third, I believe, where almost damn near every fucking punch landed on Thurman, and almost looked like he was gonna get knocked completely out. I mean, he was out on his feet for a solid minute and a half. Tried to, whether he weathered the storm, obviously, but and then tried to come back a little bit with about 30 seconds left in the fight. Uh, Lopez, punched himself out for a brief moment in the fight, and but still was able to come back and still landed some hellacious shots still toward the end. Um, and even though he escaped the round, on his feet, didn't take any knockdowns or anything like that, it was definitely a scary moment and a concerning one for sure, especially if you're a Keith Thurman fan. But he stuck to it, stuck to his at least game plan, was able to weather, well, not weather, but pretty much take up his own game plan of continue to box, and that kind of pretty much got him the fight there. It was, I guess you could say, if Lopez was maybe landing a bit more with his activity, because he was still coming forward. Obviously coming off of that round, he was pretty confident on trying to go forward, and he persisted with that. He kept that going up through the entire fight from that point in time, and was still landing some good shots. Not as frequent as he should have. At least considering his power, he probably would want to land a little bit more, but just didn't land anything as effective, or at least didn't have as an effective round, should I say, beyond that point. And Keith Thurman, went forward with the unanimous decision. So handled business as he was expected to. My my question, at least I would pose to just the general public, and at least I'll answer in my own self, is it surprised or not that Lopez had the success that he did? Again, considering the layoff that Keith Thurman had, you kind of give him that, but as bad as he did look at certain points in times, kind of just reminds me, at least, and it kind of just reaffirms my certain thoughts on who, at least certain matchups down the line. Because again, this will be brushed upon. He'll be a little bit sharper with about 2 or 3 more fights. It's still just the skill set that I'm seeing being used, even at his prime best, still seems very beatable. And the fact that just the layoff alone makes you just almost mediocre. And not to say that at least that past performance was. I mean, it was a rather decent performance. Again, expected. I'm not. This isn't a shit on Keith Thurman parade. I'm as much as I usually like to give him shit as turning him into once upon a time Thurman. He honestly didn't really do that bad. He did what he was supposed to, got the victory, and that's really all you can ask for him. You're not going to expect him to fucking look like Sugar Ray Leonard out there. But credit to him. You're hopefully gets a lot better. At least maybe can pick up some maybe new tactics or something different. Because it's pretty much it's almost starting to seem pretty cookie cutter from Keith Thurman. It's I'm hoping he can maybe switch up some things, maybe utilize some different tactics, maybe to be a bit more useful, because his abilities are going to get him to a cap at some point, and that's where I think that kind of marks him off really with the upper echelon of champions, really. And again, I still think Pacquiao beats him off of that performance, at least what I know of. He can again have 2 more fights. I still think Pacquiao would beat him if Pacquiao if Pacquiao is able to get that fight. I would say at least within the year, possibly. Who knows? I don't know. Anyway, there was some other notable fights that, well, I would say notable, but some other fights that had took place, at least I believe on that card. Not necessarily on the card, because there was two cards going on at the same time. So, because I believe actually, Jaime Muniga took on Takashi Inoue. That was, I believe, that was on the Zone. That was It was kind of a strange fight, considering if you ever seen Mugia's fights in the past, he's usually the stalker. Inoue took it upon himself to shake things up and just to turn him into the boxer, and kind of made a strange fight to see Munguia box like that. But I didn't expect him to do pretty bad at it. I mean, considering how Inoue was coming at him, it 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 didn't take any type of Muhammad Ali boxing abilities. To wear off the attack, should I say? Let's just keep it at that. But a pretty decent win, unanimous decision there. And other than that, I don't think there's anything else out of that weekend that was really worth noting, at least. But on to this weekend's fight. Sergey Kovalev is looking to redeem himself from his seventh round knockout to I always get his first name terribly wrong, so I'm just not going to bother saying it at all. But Alvarez, Alvarez of Canada, and that'll be taking place at the Ford Center in Frisco. So my thoughts on this, because I took time off last year, so we didn't really get to necessarily talk about this. But I did, of course, like I mentioned with you guys, I kept my eye on the game still entirely, just because the podcasts weren't there to follow. Didn't mean I wasn't necessarily not watching. But in the midst of Sergey Kovalev's comeback, coming off of the Ward loss, back-to-back losses, there's a big hay about the two victories he had coming off, one against Shabrinsky back in November of 2017, which I always kind of thought that was Shabrinsky is very chinny, so I thought that was nothing really to write home about. And pretty much the same with McCacklin or whatever the fuck his name was, another TKO that was in Madison Square Garden. But I'm not really. I wasn't making anything of that comeback. So Alvarez, I was actually expecting to still lose. Believe it or not, I didn't think he would. I figured he would give him a fight, but I didn't think that he would knock him out. And if you watch the fight, it was the way that fight was going. I mean, it's no fluke. It was Alvarez is doing entirely. He pushed right away for that fight, and really, and you can see in Sergey Kovalev, he's just not the same. He is not the same fighter since that Andre Ward loss, and it's seeming like he may never be that fighter again. I felt like maybe Andre Ward probably did a it's crazy to say, but it seems like Andre Ward had a career-defining beatdown of Sergey Kovalev, where the killer instinct of the boogeyman perception of Sergey Kovalev is totally diminished and gone. Whereas, you can see in Kovalev himself as he's boxing, he's not as confident, and he's very unsure quite often in the fight. In the fight with Alvarez, all it needed to show is almost kind of the same way Buster Douglas did with Mike Tyson. It's if you stand there and know that you're in the fight with him and you're willing to trade, that you ain't going nowhere. You can actually chop him down. And Alvarez was even taking his shots rather well. He took a few clean shots, rolling right with him. And it's honestly hard for me to see what exactly can change for Kovalev, other than the fact if he can I can't even say if he can reclaim his mojo as the boogeyman, because the whole thing about the boogeyman is once you find out that it's really just a worn out coat rack or whatever with a tablecloth over it or whatever, then it's not so scary anymore. And again, given the fact that Alvarez seemed to take his punches rather well in the first fight, it's hard for me to not see how Alvarez will win again. And then maybe even a shorter knockout. Who knows, man? I really think Kovalev is honestly past it at this point. And yeah, it wouldn't surprise me if in fact he does happen to lose this fight, if he actually retires at that point too. Because he would know himself that he's not serving, I guess, his own confidence of purpose at that point, and that's really what's important for a fighter at the end of the day, other than feeding their family. And yeah, it's kind of it's kind of sad, but funny in the sense because I mean, it's sad just because it's the fact that it's happening to a fighter, and it's is kind of just how it goes. It's funny though, I'm kind of having a laugh really just because Kovalev's kind of been a racist prick. So I don't um I don't necessarily feel too bad for him in any of this circumstance because and he was very arrogant too. Yeah, when it was flying high, So when people are humbled, it's kind of funny to see the realizations they face. But yeah, I guess I think that was pretty much I laid out my prediction there too. Alvarez to at least get a knockout earlier. Well, possibly I would say even within the same time frame that he got the first knockout. So fight Alvarez. And now I was actually looking into the quote that came from Danny Jacobs, who will be fighting Canelo Alvarez later this spring. And a quote that was pulled from a recent article I just found on Boxing Scene was quoted in the fact that Alvarez would be a career-defining win for Danny Jacobs. And I don't know why, but the moment I saw the quote, it just immediately just made my eyes almost just like I don't know, just maybe it just caught my eyes just right away. I guess is the word I'm trying to find. And I don't know why, but I just think that the fact that he's already now fought and at least has fought Gennady Golovkin, in the time that he did, unified champion, at least looking to kind of get that pay-per-view monster created or at least rolling there. So I think he at least was in his second or third pay-per-view fight. But still didn't seem to find that, as much as a bigger test, and a bigger moment, but yet still lost. You know what I mean? So I guess in the collective, I think I just found it funny that I guess so I guess if I'm asking Danny Jacobs if he's in front of me right now, my question would be, so what in significance changed with Gennady Golovkin than it is with Canelo Alvarez? Well, yes, I can understand the stardom and the views and all of that, but that couldn't match anything bigger than being a unified champion to me. So that being said, if 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 this is a career defining fight, then I guess then what the hell was fighting Gennady Golovkin? I'm maybe just looking too much into this and just taking regular fighter jargon, amped up, hyped up bullshit out of proportion, because that really could very well be the case. He's just maybe creating a scenario for himself to get the best out of himself for this fight. So maybe that's all that's taking place. I tend to look into too much into things like that, but I just wanted to just bring that up for a moment, just because I did find that something that was kind of interesting there. And also, Tevin Farmer will be headlining in Philly this March 15th against Joan O'Carroll of Ireland. It's pretty much looks like this again. This is something from Eddie Hearn's Matchroom USA, in collaboration, at least with Luda Bella's promotion team as well. This is actually a pretty solid fucking card that's actually packed out here. I'm particularly excited because, again, this is located at the Leocourse Center in Philadelphia, which is about 40 minutes away from me, so I can definitely get right to the event, possibly. And then again, this is actually going to be on a Friday, so if I can find a way to cover this fight, I will be hoping to look to do a podcast from the Leocourse Center, hopefully with anyone we can probably get on the pod just to speak with and grab some interviews and things like that. I mentioned a stat card. I actually haven't mentioned anyone who's at least going to be fighting. Katie Taylor also will be there fighting Rose Volante of Brazil, ranked at number 5. And Hank Lundy, also another Philadelphia fighter, will be fighting Avery Sparrow. That'll actually be a local scrap there. It'll be nice to catch. And Gabe Rosado will be fighting. I'm gonna screw this name up. Maciej Sulecki of Poland. Fought Danny Jacobs. If that rings any bells, you guys should at least be familiar with him. He actually was one of the last few fights on HBO. Danny Jacobs had knocked him. Actually, had a pretty decent knockout, but still went to the cards. Actually, kind of gave Danny Jacobs a pretty decent fight. But again, Gabe Rosado will be fighting him as well in the undercard of this fight. So, I mean, these are the pretty much 4 main headliners of the fight. Pretty quality card here. So I'm looking to get that covered, at least on behalf of Real Combat Media, maybe writing up a report and just doing some interviews there. So, look out for that. Again, that'll be March 15th, and that'll be viewed on DAZN if you guys will be wanting to look out for that on at least what channel. More on that to come, of course. But other than that, I think we actually ran through a pretty successful episode here of the podcast. All the topics covered and made pretty decent good time. And I didn't get cut off like I got cut off last week. So sorry about that, guys. Guys, if you ever wonder, episode just ends abruptly. For some reason, if there's a server issue with YouTube, it will just crash out and just end my shit, and I can't. And if I'm here by myself just doing the pod, then the stream is over. The link itself is done, and I would have to create a new one. So that's why I typically don't really come back if there is one. But at least a little comment and let you guys know. But other than that, enjoy the fights tomorrow. Stay safe. Stay warm out there. It's fucking freezing. Peace.